Okay, guys, so today we are going to look at a kind of very strategic approach to fight the French defense from white. And that's the so-called King's Indian attack. And it's a system opening, a bit like the London. So you have your planners white where you put your pieces, and then after 10 moves or so, the game kind of starts. And we are going to look at a very classical approach here. So since it's a system opening, kind of the King's Indian attack approach is to put the bishop on g2. And of course, there are many ways to play as black, but there's one that I've kind of played as mainline my whole life, and I think is a very good one. So basically up to here, it's all normal developing moves, and as usual in a King's Indian, the King's Indian player wants to play on the King's side. So it's clear that e4, e5 is coming. And that gives white a space advantage on the King's side, so black in turn wants to play on the Queen's side and already prepares a space gain here. So there are some games where white takes on d5, but that's not really principled, so we're not going to look at that. e5, knight d7, knight f1, bishop b7. Soon it will become clear why black is starting with this development and doesn't play a5, for example, yet. So h4, this is kind of still all system for white, because the advance of the h-pawn is kind of useful in weakening or inducing a weakening of black's king side. Also, it stops any possible g5 in case, white puts the bishop here. It can't be disturbed with g5 anymore. So queen c7, bishop f4, and now very subtle, rook fc8. So we are preparing the return of the queen to d8, and as I said, things will become clearer as we go on. And it's important to do all of this quickly, because now that the bishop is landed on f4, and that would be threatening something like knight d5 and e6, kind of like a discovery. So bishop looking here, the e-pawn could advance and attack the knight. So here black would be in time to play queen d8. So that's why it's important to start with this bishop b7, to have rook fc8 and queen d8 quite quickly. So anyways, we're following a game, knight 1 h2, queen d8. The stem game is a game between Lenier Dominguez Perez with black playing Amin Bassem as white, who was the #1 African player, sometimes above 2700, and he is a practitioner of the King's Indian attack his whole life. So it's kind of interesting how black managed to get a good position against him. But along these lines, I also have some games. I want to quickly show something here. So in my game, after h5, we go h6. So that's like the first very key idea, that in the system, we do not allow white to kind of take the pawn all the way to h6, because then after g6 we would have holes all around our king, and they are long term, they don't go away, we don't want that. So we play h6, c3, a5, queen d2, and here I did something interesting, because I have vacated the f8 square, putting the rook here. I need this to organize my defenses. So one way is to eventually drop back with the bishop to f8, bolstering indirectly this pawn on h6 against any possible sacrifices. And another idea, to kind of be even more secure on the king side, is to bring the knight all the way to h7 and then perhaps put the bishop on f8. This is what I did in the game. So my opponent played a4. I kept everything fluid here, knight g4, knight h7. And here I've completed my, so to say, defensive setup. And basically, white's play on the king side is completely halted, because sacrificing on h6 will kind of just lose a piece, and there is no real follow-up to the action, because already I got the knight here, the queen could swing over to the king side immediately, and there are just no reinforcements once white has given up everything on h6. So that means that basically the king side is sealed, and black has a free hand on the other side of the board. And we'll just quickly go through this game. So already we see white has no ideas, and I'm strengthening my position. Eventually I gave up a pawn here to clear the way. I was sure I would win this pawn back eventually. So my pieces enter. Knight a7, very nice. Also going against this weakness. And we see, white was just marking time. I took the pawn back. And eventually the game was decided on the queen side, playing against white's weakness on c3. So here there were exchanges, and then at the end everything was dropping. So that's kind of to illustrate the strategic ideas. And yeah, we are talking about the opening as such and what to do with black. But as I said, when we play against the King's Indian attack, it becomes a very strategic game. So it's not so much about knowing, finesses in the early on, but to understand what's going on in the ensuing positions, like what's the strategic picture, what we are playing for, and then we need to find the right ideas accordingly. So I think this knight f8, knight h7 was an interesting twist. And in our stem game, similar things happened. Here, normally, if white wouldn't do anything on the queen side, but just continue knight g4, then we stop the pawn. And before there's too much action on h6, we defend with bishop f8. And this is always a solid setup, and this knight can potentially also be rerouted here. And idea is the same. We want to lock down the king side and then develop our play on the queen side. And there are all kinds of breaks possible on the queen side with d4, with b4, sometimes even some combination of c4 and a3. So there's room for creativity. So let's go back to the stem game. Yeah, here a very important moment. So we do not want to get our side closed. So if we were playing b4, then basically after c4 and b3, there would be no way to open up the queen side anymore, and white would have achieved something similar as to what we are trying to do on the king side. So I don't like b4 in this scenario. If the black pawn were already on a4, then this pawn will not be so easily defended. And if a pawn appears on b3, that itself would become a weakness, the a file opened. But with white's pawn on a4, this is like lockdown of the queen side. So it's either playing bishop a6 or taking on a4. So in the game, bishop a6. And basically white started to attack, but knight on h3 is not very impressive, but the path for the queen is opened. So black continues play on the queen side. And since the d3 pawn is always falling if the queen were to go to g4, white started some kind of combinatorial attack. So playing c4, dc4, queen g4, burning the bridges, but at least not having the bishop appear on d3 from which he could return also to the defenses. And yeah, here ultimately black did prevail in the game, didn't play the very best defense here. So queen f8 was the best, and after knight f4, knight c3, takes on a8, knight h5, there was a key move rook a4. You see, it's like everything quite concrete, so you know it's kind of the position where the guy who plays better that they will win. But yeah, here it's a black win. And yeah, in the game after bishop f8, white didn't find a way to crash through, had some chances, but here knight came to the defense on e7, and somehow white ran out of ideas, played bishop g5, which was too meek, and then black is just too fast here. And yeah, nice touch with rook a1, just want to crash through on d1, and of course this bishop on b5 is a very strong piece. This king is weak forever. The bishop can also drop back to c6, so strategically it's a disaster. And here the game also ended pretty quickly. A couple more moves, but yeah, that's enough.
There's a couple of things I want to look at from the lines you showed me.
Yes.
The one that we're just determining where do you want to put the knight on f8 or the bishop on f8? There's a line where the bishop went to f8 instead.
Yes.
And was there any possibility that white can try to build up a sacking opportunities and sack twice and maybe g4, g5 to break through that way?
Okay, so two questions. One, if a sacrifice on h6 is ever worthwhile, right? Like here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the second plan switch g4, g5. Okay.
Yeah.
So here we get to a kind of a logical position to discuss this, because as I said here, it's kind of the normal follow-up. Don't touch the queen side as white, but build up. So knight g4, h5, h6, queen d2 to I h6, bishop f8, and now we have nothing more to do as white, so we take, yeah. Or maybe with the bishop actually, it looks a bit more forcing. And here I would take everything and queen f8. So of course the queen needs to withdraw. Queen f4, I think. I go queen g7. Now I bring my defenders. So if you go h6, I go queen g6. If you go knight h4, I'm saying that you misplaced the knight now because it's attacking so as kind of g5. So I go queen h7, and next I will go king h8, rook g8, and my king is totally safe. And I can also at some point bring the other knight or try to exchange something. So I have the situation very much under control here.
Yeah, with that being said, instead of h5, maybe g4 from white.
Yes. But okay, you mean
after the sacks?
Knight g4.
No, it's like the sacks. Yeah.
Okay.
So the sacks come in, queen goes f8, and queen f4, and then instead of queen
Instead of
h6,
h6,
yeah,
yes.
g4. I'm trying to do g5, especially this way. Any difference there?
Yeah, it's a good point. Let's think. I'm hesitating for a moment because I want to play king g8, sorry, king h8 and rook g8. This kind of disturbs me a little bit, but I just go rook f8 here. And like generally speaking, like I'm a piece up and there's kind of no way to really attack, so I can take my time to, just bring defenders. Knight e7, knight g8, knight h6, the knight defends f7 from there, then I suddenly have rook g8. So I will start to just push you back. And I have no idea how white in the meantime could really make headway.
Okay, sounds good. And the second question is, what if they go c3 earlier, let's say on move 6, before bishop g2 happened, they go c3. I see sometimes people play early c3 to go d4 fast.
Okay, like this.
Yeah. Trying to
Knight
go d4.
c6.
Mm-hmm. All right, so do e5
and then
and
you
d4,
go,
yes.
yes.
So
This looks, this looks quite strange to me because it's reminiscent of this knight d2 French, but you kind of lost the tempo as white, so this shouldn't be working out at all, I think. So for instance, if I take here, like there are lots of lots of things I like. Let's say queen b6. Yeah, you kind of have to play knight b3 here just to protect on d4. And I would go a5. Now, if I get to play f4, it's unpleasant, so if you stop me, I go here. And already here you cannot take back properly, because you need to defend on b3. So this all looks very wrong. Like already after a5, I think there's no good move for white.
That's true. So with that,
So you can play c3, but after knight c6 you can't play e5.
hey, check this video out to make sure that you get more important information to bring your chess to the next level.